Hello students, I am here again to take up the rest of the poem The Patriot, that is stanzas 4, 5 and 6. But before I move on to stanza number 4, let me get back to the first 3 stanzas that I have already taught in the previous class. So the opening lines of the poem plunges us straight into the middle of the narrative of the speaker. It was roses, roses all the way. The picture of a flower bestrewn path or road immediately leaps to our mind. The flowers are roses and myrtle, symbolizing love and peace. The sweet-smelling flowers will soon rot with the hate of the people. The image of the housetops heaving and swaying under the weight of the teeming millions. It seems as if the houses themselves are swaying. Here the poet has used personification because he's giving person-like qualities to those housetops. The church spire, pointed roof of the church seemed to be on flame, covered by the brightly colored flags. Now a metaphor is being used here. The immediacy of the description makes us forget that all this happened a year ago. In stanza 3, the word alack conveys the poet's sense of regret and realization. The speaker realizes that he has overreached himself, leapt at the sun, and that's a reminder of the myth of Icarus, about which I already have told you in the previous class. He did this, my loving friends, to keep. Now he is reaping what he has sown. The harvest of his actions is pitiable. So this stanza 3, which I explained in my last class, and according to that, it says, as you sow, so shall you reap. And that goes true of the speaker. So now we move on to the 4th stanza. There's nobody on the housetops now, just a palsied few at the window set. For the best of the sight is, all aloud, at the shambles gate, or better yet, by the very scaffold's foot I trow. So, my dear students, in this 4th stanza, you can see that the stanza records speaker's present thoughts. The patriot is being taken to scaffold for his year's misdeeds. There's nobody on the housetops now except for few suffering from palsy. So as the lines go, there's nobody on the housetops now, just a palsied few at the window set. So nobody can be seen in the houses or on the house tops, just a few people who are suffering from palsy. Now this stanza is a great contrast, especially these two lines are a great contrast to the previous stanza, the first stanza, where it says the house roofs seem to heave and sway. Now with the cheering, with the adulation of the crowd for the patriot, the house roofs seem to sway and heave. And now in this stanza, there was nobody on the housetops, just a few suffering from palsy. For the best of the sight is, all allow, at the shambles gate, or better yet, by the scaffold's very foot I trow. Trow here means believe. Now the speaker says that everyone knows that today the best of the sights is going to be at the shambles gate or by the scaffold's foot. So here the speaker is trying to convey to the readers that though there is a crowd of people, but they're all moving towards the shambles gate. They are all moving to see the execution of this speaker. Now, the same person who was treated and was considered to be a patriot and treated with a lot of praise, adulation, is now being humiliated, and he's literally being dragged to the scaffold's foot. Now, scaffold's foot is a platform where criminals are punished by being hanged or beheaded. So, in this stanza, the poet is trying to tell us through the thoughts of the speaker that the speaker has been paid for his deeds. And that can be very well seen from the sight of the people, that there are no people there on the housetops except for the ones who cannot move out or who are suffering from palsy. Then, as the speaker is being marched for his execution, the same crowd which was full of adulation once, now where has that crowd gone? The crowd has gone inside the gates of the place where he is to be hanged. That's the shambles gate. These people are hungry to see him hung. They are ready to take the revenge. They are extremely eager to see the sight of he being hanged. And they are crowding around the scaffold's foot. And this is probably around the same time of the year, where once he was praised and cheered for. My dear students, another person wrote about the same things in his famous work, A Tale of Two Cities, where he mentioned how the French would crowd around the guilty when the nobles were carried for their execution. So probably in those days people behaved in this manner. When the person was in power, they would be in praises for him. They would be putting flowers in his way. And when the person was considered to be a traitor for some of his misdeeds, they would be eager to go and watch his execution or watch him being hanged. So the poet here tells us that the more eager ones have already reached the place where he is going to be hanged. They are curious. And they are eager to see the person being taken away in humiliation. So, my dear students, now before I start explaining every line to you of the fifth stanza, let me just give you a few important or salient features of the fifth stanza. Now, as you can see on the screen, now the fifth stanza tells us about that instead of bright weather, it is now raining, and the dull, depressing weather echoes the pathos of the scene. Whereas earlier, he must have ridden victoriously, returning from some brave deed or achievement, and today a rope cuts into wrists which are tied behind him. So this is the pitiable condition of the speaker who was once considered a patriot and now a traitor. So Line-wise, stanza 5. I go in the rain and more than needs. A rope cuts my wrists behind, and I think by the feel of my forehead bleeds, for they fling whoever has a mind. Stones at me for my years' misdeeds. Now, this is a very emotional, a very touching stanza, and the speaker is now moving in the rain towards his end. Now, here the mention of the rain is there just because rain is also very depressing. You know, when it rains, you're caught inside, indoors, you probably have to stay indoors and you can't move out, and sometimes it becomes very depressing. So a rope cuts my wrist behind. Now his wrists get cut by the rope which is used to tie his hands behind. Now this is truly a scene of pathos. And I think by the feel of my forehead bleeds, and then he can feel the blood trickling down his forehead. And this is why, because the people, the crowd is flinging stones at him, throwing stones at him. So the public that once regarded him with great respect now throws stones at him. His forehead bleeds, and probably he feels that this is the punishment for a year's misdeeds or misdoings. So the speaker says that I go in the rain, means now once upon a time he basked in the sun of fame, and now he's going towards shame. So rain could be considered as shame here also. Whoever cheered him earlier, they are now flinging stones at him for all his errors and all the wrongdoings. Probably this is because he has misused his power. So in the poem you can have, children, two kinds of perception. One perception is of the speaker and one perception is of the crowd. How the crowd perceive the speaker to be and how the speaker perceives. So further, when you're going to do some, put down some notes, you can always make two columns showing the behavior earlier and then now, because a lot of questions come on this. And now when he's infamous, he's full of shame, indignity, and people in power think that they are doing the best. But at the same time, the crowd feels that there could be more. Now, my dear students, as we move on to the sixth stanza, you can see that the speaker himself contrasts his past and present in the last stanza. Because the lines say, thus I entered and thus I go. The speaker looks forward to the day when God might ask him about his actions. He has been judged by the world of man. Now he looks forward to God's judgment. And he looks forward to this and says, I'm safer so. Perhaps the speaker feels that the true judgment will be assured with God, and in spite of all his sorrows, he is optimistic. So the last stanza is a reflection of Robert Browning's poetry, because he also uses an element of optimism in his poetry. So the last stanza shows and tells us how the speaker is being optimistic. The poem leaves us with a feeling of deep pathos as we ponder the fragility of fame. Children, fame is very fragile. You may be famous one day. You may stand first in class. But if you become overproud and overambitious, you're bound to come down. And this is what happens. So the fragility of fame is being depicted here. Strangely enough, there's no feeling of bitterness. through the speaker, the poet doesn't convey any kind of bitterness in him. He says that probably I am being punished for my misdeeds. But then at the same time, he has faith in God. And he's being optimistic that perhaps God will have a safer way for me, a safer place for me. So, stanza 6. Thus I entered and thus I go. In triumphs people have dropped down dead. Paid by the world, what dost thou owe me? God might question. Now instead, 'tis God shall repay. I am safer, so. So here you can see the poem ends quite optimistically, and he has entered the gates of death and now is ready to go to his life after death. Thus I entered and thus I go. So he says, in this way I entered and this is how I go. So here again is a contrast. Many people die at the height of their fame. So then he goes on to say, paid by the world, what dost thou owe me? Now he's just, he says that he'll ask God that what does God owe me? Now already the speaker has resigned himself to his fate, and he believes that in victory people drop down dead, but his imperfection will bring him closer to God. The patriot hopes that since he did not receive his reward in this world, he will be rewarded in the other world. He feels safe in the hands of God. So, my dear students, this stanza truly reflects Browning's optimistic philosophy of life. And when the speaker resigns to his fate, so he's totally ready for whatever God has in store for him. He feels that there is God above. And the speaker is a passage, is actually a public figure with a lot of power. So how the speaker goes up so high and then finally meets his death. So in the beginning, the crowd shows jubilation and adulation, and now the same road is being travelled in humiliation by the speaker. So from a patriot, he becomes a traitor. So my dear children, this is all for today. I hope you have understood the complete poem thoroughly. As in between, I have also put in a few slides which give you a glimpse of the salient features of the poem. So you must make a note of all those and revise the poem well. And one more thing, whenever you are there for an English class, you please open your books and refer to the chapter or the poem that is being taught to you, in order to make yourselves understand the text in a better way. Thank you.